have a short video to play now.
This meeting will be conducted as a Zoom webinar to allow for public participation and comments. The Contra Costa Transportation Authority does not condone hate speech in any form. We continually strive to make life better for all members of our community and create an atmosphere where everyone feels a sense of safety and belonging. We ask that anyone who wishes to speak does so with civility, respect, and kindness for others. Citizens will have 3 minutes to speak. It is requested that public speakers state their names and organizations, but providing such information is voluntary. Citizens participating in person wishing to speak should submit a public speaker card to the clerk. Citizens participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature or dial *9 if participating via phone, and the chair or staff will call upon them at the appropriate time. Written public comments received in accordance with the teleconferencing special notice on the meeting agenda will be provided to the members. If authors of the written correspondence would like to speak, they should raise their hand in Zoom or submit a public speaker card, and the chair will call upon them at the appropriate time. All written correspondence received after that and during the meeting will be entered into the record. Thank you for participating in a meeting of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority.
Thank you. Deanna, if you could please do the roll call.
Member Barnes?
Present.
Member Thompson?
Yeah.
Vice Chair Churchill?
Here.
Acting Chair Andrzejczyk?
Present.
We do have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Have we received any public comment?
We have not received any public comment.
All right. Is there anyone wishing to speak? I don't see any members of the public here.
No members of the public are here. No virtual comment.
No virtual comments. Okay. All right, on to number 3, consent calendar with summary of actions from April 1st, 2024. Any changes, comments from the committee?
Motion approved. Churchill, second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any written public comments?
No written public comment.
Okay, no one in the room. Anyone online for public comment?
No virtual public comment.
Okay. We have a motion and a second, and a roll call vote, please.
Member Barnes?
Aye.
Member Thompson?
Yes.
Vice Chair Churchill?
Aye.
And Acting Chair Andrzejczyk.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, that was number 3. Now we'll move on to the regular agenda items. We have one action item that will be introduced by Ying Smith to discuss approval of the fiscal year 24-25 Measure J allocation for countywide bus services, which is Program 14, and countywide express bus, which is Program 16. Ying?
Thank you, Acting Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. So this is the annual Measure J allocation item for programs 14 and 16. Just a very brief background. The Measure J Transportation Expenditure Plan established Program 14 at 5% of the revenue and Program 16 at 4.3%. In the upcoming fiscal year, FY 24-25, the projection is of the Measure J revenue is $120 million. So therefore, the total allocation to Program 14 is $6 million, and the total allocation to Program 16 is $5,160,000. And the staff report has the details of how we calculate the allocation to each transit operator, and then as well as the dollar amount. This is something you see every year. I just, in my presentation, want to highlight some of the changes since the more typical in the past. One small change is how we allocate the program management costs to staff. We're taking a more systematic approach this year, so we'll apply 1% to all the countywide programs. The other change is the relatively new Measure J reserve, and on the staff report on page 4, we explained there are actually 2 reserves, and the first one is included in the expenditure plan, that is the Transit Operating Program Reserve. And that's something you saw every year. So this year, the calculation is if there's an increase at all above the change in the consumer price index compared to the revenue, then we're required to set aside reserve. And in this year, the CPI increase was 3.76, while the sales tax received increase was only 0.36%. So therefore, it doesn't trigger that threshold, so there's no program reserve that we put aside. What is new this year is because the board approved Resolution 2233P, Measure J reserve policy. This is the first year we're setting aside contribute to the reserve. That policy calls for if there's a increase, a surplus, when you compare the difference between the actual Measure J revenue collected and the estimated revenue in the mid-year budget, then that delta, that surplus, will be put aside in the Measure J reserve. So what we look at is FY 22-23. We look back last year this is the first time we have the actual. So in FY 22-23, the mid-year projection was $110 million versus the actual receipt was $123,501,273. So that roughly $13.5 million will be put aside in the Measure J reserve. So for program 14 and 16, I have the dollar amount there, and I just want to verbally make the correction, and that will be reflected in the final report going to the board. From program 14, the actual Measure J reserve is $675,064. The reserve going to program 16 is $580,000 and $555. So those are that is really the major change from our past practice because the Measure J policy. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Ying. And now comments from the committee. Go ahead, Rashidi.
Yeah, one question, Ying, and thank you for your report. The 1% off the top, that's based off of the total amount between 14 and 16, or is that the 1% from, I guess, the individual amounts?
It's the individual amount for each program. So there's 1% of 14 and 1% of 16. And that is included in the resolution. You can see the dollar amount.
Go ahead, Bill.
Ying, I thank you for the report. I appreciate it, and for the correction. Good to know and have the information. So I had a comment and then a question as well. And thank you for bringing up the reserve. I was going to bring that up, the new reserve policy. One of the concerns I have about that new reserve policy is the new purposes that it could be used for. And it states in the policy, it can be used for fund priority projects and programs identified by the authority to be eligible under the Measure J expenditure program, to fund administrative salaries and benefits for delivery of remaining Measure J projects and programs that extend beyond the life of Measure J, and finally, to meet any unfunded pension liabilities. And the reason I bring this up is this is now the first year for County Connection at least where we have expended all of our federal COVID-19 mitigation funding. And so for the first time in about 3 or 4 years, we will be dipping into our reserves to the tune of $3.6 million in order to balance our budget. And these funds historically would have gone directly to the operators that would have helped us offset these types of situations. And so I just wanted to put that out as a reminder that these funds historically have had very real on-the-ground impacts to providing services to the communities we serve. So my question is, Ying, would it be possible for you to create a chart moving forward that would track these funds, the components that would have otherwise gone to the operators, such that it's called out separately and easy to see moving forward within the reserve? And I ask that because we here at the table have had conversations with the Executive Director, Tim Hale, regarding the intention is not to redirect the funds away from the operators, rather to hold them in reserve, only to return them to the operators at some later date. And if that's the case, with time, it would be easy to lose track of what that dollar volume would be. So it's just a request. Didn't know if that was something that you could do, and would appreciate hearing any thoughts you might have on that.
Yes, Bill, that appreciate the feedback. So this is the first time we're doing it, and we have documented in the staff report, and I know is because this is supposed to be a bank, right? We'll keep putting the deposit to it. And I think next year we will, given your input, we'll probably put in the table format just for total transparency. And so far we keep track of that in the staff report, and I can see that can get lost next year.
Thank you.
Appreciate your feedback.
Through the chair, if I can.
Go right ahead.
Just as a follow-up on that bank concept. When a withdrawal is made from the bank, will we be aware of it if it goes to fund unfunded pension liabilities, or what, or one of the 4 or 5 bullets? Will we be aware of it? Will we have the opportunity to vote on it or to be a part of the conversation? Or is that at the discretion of the 2 CTA board, or maybe just the authority itself?
So I hope you download that policy. I have that in front of me. So what it says is how we use it, right? The required approvals to utilize the funds from the reserve. It says reserve funds must be appropriated by a resolution adopted by the authority board to ensure the tracking. So our board makes that decision. We haven't established the practice whether it has to go through BTCC. I think you do have the opportunity to provide input on our process, and I think the policy probably just keeps it very high level, like our authority board has the ultimate decision on as we withdraw the money from the bank and for different uses.
Typically, and correct me if I'm wrong, when one of us asks for allocation or gets an allocation, it has to go to one of the smaller committees, subcommittees, even maybe it's a transplant or RPTA, but yes, all of it funnels up through 2 CTA's board. I would say this process probably should be the same, where a secondary committee is a part of the conversation before it recommends it before it goes to the 2 CTA board.
Yeah, I will definitely take that as a feedback. Would you further specify, because there are other programs who also have, because when we put aside the reserve, each program gets that because it's the total $30 million, right? Would you further clarify the request to go through BTCC to be limited to program 14, 16, and potentially 15, or you would like to see that on other programs? For example, program 17 is commute alternatives. You usually don't have, you haven't participated, all of you. So would you want to further clarify that? A common suggestion would be kind of more specific to certain programs.
A lot has changed in the last couple of years. And so I think that we should take a look at what our current practices are for those programs, because to your point, the bus operators typically don't access some of those programs. But to Bill's point earlier, things are changing. He may need something, I may need something, Rob or Chris may need something. And so maybe how, I don't know how we'd do that, but have a larger discussion about those programs and how it's allocated, where the funding goes, and how we play a role in the decision-making process. Does that make sense?
Well, I think I was just going to add, I think I like the idea of potentially going to the RTPCs, because I think all the programs touch the RTPCs, correct?
We, 14 and 16, like the bus programs, we don't go through the RTPCs. They are not part of the decision makings, except for some sub-regional programs. Then we're kind of going away from this topic now.
But I think if the idea was that everything that was in the reserves kind of was something that we wanted to review, the RTPCs could be a place where it could happen.
Forgive me, may I step in?
Go right ahead.
Ying, I know we're making it complicated, and I apologize for that. And maybe to provide some clarity to the question you asked, at least me, I'm fine with clarifying within the scope of these programs, the three that you mentioned, actually.
For the record, 14, 15, and 16.
Thank you. As long as there was some methodology that it could come back to the BTCC or some subgroup where we would have an opportunity to see, know, and understand how and where those funds were distributed, I'd be fine with that. Getting to Rashidi's point, there are a whole lot of programs out there that the operators don't typically avail themselves of, but as we move forward, and as we as operators are venturing into new realms of providing transportation, there may be opportunities for us to avail ourselves of those funds. And so there should be some dialogue along that, but I think that's separate from this particular project, where we look at how and where we could potentially look at some of those funds. And I wanted to make sure with my colleagues, did I frame that up reasonably appropriately?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
And I'll just chime in generally. I support everything that's been said. I think that the issue here is that because this is sort of the first time you're doing this reserve, and it's a little unclear to all of us exactly how this works, and probably to you also, that, you know, the clarity of how these things are supposed to be, you know, are going to be allocated or at what time would help all of us, because even if it doesn't, something doesn't necessarily come to this committee, at least we know where it will go and where we can sort of direct our comments and our, you know, our suggestions. Particularly if you're, so that, you know, the 13 million or so is kind of the amount off of the total measure, and you can kind of say that, you know, some amount might be for this program and this program, and so particularly if you're getting into, you know, allocating larger amounts away from, or at least considering allocating them away from where they might sort of live on a prorated basis, then definitely coming to this committee would be great. But in general, just somehow defining the process so we at least know where we can sort of have input and help guide those decisions.
Yeah. Thank you all for clarifying your input. Yeah, I agree. This is the first time we're doing it, and there were a lot of smart people helping me in this process. Let me put it that way. And just for clarification, the $13 million in the surplus, that allocation follows the same formula. So, for example, the 14 is 5%. 16 is the 4.2%, so it's the same. So that is across the board, and we are required to keep track of them by the program.
Okay.
Yeah, and just I guess to follow up on something Bill said, that, you know, he's sort of running out of, and the federal funds this year, we're running out of them next year, and, you know, we're all concerned about that sort of fiscal cliff. And so, you know, to the extent that CCTA has these resources and can help out operators, that is, I think, one of the reasons why we're very concerned about this money.
Yeah, well said. I have one last comment, if I may.
Go ahead.
Ying, just from my perspective, I do appreciate your responses, the way in which you've thought about it, even framing it up for us. So to kick off the discussion, it's not necessarily easy. And we know that these were decisions that were made before you even arrived at 2CTA, and we all up here appreciate that. So I just wanted to thank you for that and your willingness to work with us on it.
Thank you for the comment.
Echo that. So any written public comments?
We have no written public
No
comment.
written public comments. I'm not sure if that's a member of the public behind, no. Staff person is like, any comments online, any raised hands?
We have no virtual comment either.
Okay. So now we need a motion.
Churchill, I'll move the item.
I'll second Thompson.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can you call the roll, please?
Member Barnes?
Aye.
Member Thompson?
Aye.
Member or Vice Chair Churchill?
Aye.
Acting Chair Antrachek?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you, Deanna. So that's it for our regular items. Correspondence and communications. Anyone, anything they'd like to report? No? Okay, then we are at adjournment. So next regular meeting proposed for September 9th at 2:30 p.m. Thank you very much, everyone.
Recording stopped.